Welcome to the Coffee Clutch, a social gathering for good conversation over a cup of coffee. So grab your cup and let's get started. I want to begin today by thanking my daughter and son-in-law for my new Coffee Clutch mug. It was such a surprise to get it in the mail, and they've been so supportive of my YouTube journey, and again, just many thanks for being there, and I'm really enjoying my new mug. Now, today I want to talk a little bit about those people that you have met, or maybe you happen to be one of these people who makes the comment, I have no regrets in life, no regrets at all, because my mistakes as well as my successes are what make me who I am. And while it is true that our experiences collectively through life make us who we are, do we really need to make mistakes? I know I've heard it said, well, you got to let them make mistakes. They've got to make the mistakes on their own. That's how they learn. Really? I know we do make mistakes. I know it's part of life. I know I've made my fair share of mistakes. But there's an old saying that would suggest otherwise. And it's a saying that comes from or is derived from one of Aesop's fables, and we have pulled from Aesop's before. Aesop's, as I've mentioned before, was born in 620 BC, 620 years before the birth of Christ. He died in 564 BC, 564 years before the birth of Christ. So clearly, this isn't a new idea. And in the fable of the lion, the ass, and the fox, we are taught from Aesop's to learn from the mistakes of others. The saying, as we're more familiar with it nowadays, is learn from the mistakes of others, because life is too short to make them all yourself. And in the more contemporary time, we hear that from Otto von Bismarck, and he was born in 1815, died in 1898. So again, this is an old saying that has carried through many generations and across many different peoples, that life is too short to make all the mistakes yourselves. Now, in the fable, The Lion, the Ass, and the Fox, it's a great story, just a great story. The lion, the ass, and the fox go out and they they weren't grocery stores back then. They go out and hunt for food together. They take all the food and gather it together, and the lion asks the ass to divide the food amongst the three of them. So the ass decides, well, he will divide it evenly between the three of them. The lion wasn't very happy with that decision, and with one strike of his paw, he kills the ass. Then he turns to the fox and says to the fox, you divide the food between the two of us. Well, the fox, knowing exactly the fate of the ass, doesn't make the same mistake. He doesn't need to make the mistake to understand. He immediately gives the lion the great share of the food and really takes for himself only what he would need. And the lion says to the fox, how did you ever learn to divide so fairly? And if you pay attention, it wasn't equal, it was fair. Another very important lesson. Equal isn't always what is fair. And of course it makes sense. The lion was going to need more of the food than the fox. So we learn a couple of things from this old fable. And once again, when we hear it from, like I said, Otto von Bismarck, he was a gentleman who held very many titles. And he was at one time the president of Persia. He also held the title of Duke of Bismarck, and in his older years he was the Chancellor of Bismarck and held an important role in German government and greatly influenced German and international politics. So this was a man, a learned man, and both of these renditions of this same old saying are very important for us. I know it takes a little bit of humility. Humility is a theme amongst many of these old sayings. It takes some humility not to just dive into something, but rather to step back and possibly ask for help. Because while it is true, we can learn from our own mistakes, and hopefully we do. It is inevitable that we will make them, but it certainly shouldn't be our goal. Certainly shouldn't be our goal to make the mistakes so we can learn, because you also learn from doing things properly and doing things well. You learn a great deal from that, and you avoid a great deal of hardship if you get it done right the first time. So sometimes we do have to stop and ask for help, and somebody older than us or more experienced than us can teach us a little bit about the things we were trying to do. I can remember as a child wanting to get the dishes done quickly and drying the dishes and carrying a large stack of plates that my mother said, don't carry all those plates at one time. You're going to drop them. Don't do that. Oh, but I was smarter than my mother, of course. And I thought I could do it, and indeed I did drop the top 3 plates. They shattered on the floor, and she was none too happy. Did I learn from that? Yes, I did. Did I need to learn from that mistake? No, I didn't. If I had listened to the experience of somebody else, I could have avoided that. And of course, we have all gone through this. I would love to hear some of your examples of things that you learned the hard way. Learning the easy way is to learn from the mistakes of others. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to share these old sayings with people, because they, again, impart some really wonderful wisdom that is just apropos across the ages. It can be hard to have to ask for help. Of course, we like to think we can do it all ourselves, but we can't. It's one of the reasons I think it's interesting when somebody makes the comment, I've learned from my mistakes as well as my successes, and when I look back on life, I have no regrets. I find that an intriguing comment. I know I have some regrets. I can remember just from the time when I was a little girl, being in grade school, and there was one young lady in our class who was really mercilessly teased. It wasn't really bullying per se. They were just little comments, snide comments, but they were hurtful, very hurtful. And when I look back on those days, boy, I wish I could go back and stand next to her and defend her. I really do. I regret that greatly. Now, my mother always told me and taught me to be there for other people when they needed help, and not to just stand by and watch somebody else be unkind to someone. But I didn't listen to her necessarily. Took some time. I had to grow up. But boy, I wish when I was younger in my grade school years that I could have stood up for this young person. And it's something that I taught my children, or tried to. I remember telling them, you will never regret being kind. Somebody may be unkind to you, but that doesn't mean that you have to regret having been kind to them. Kindness is a good way to approach life. It's a good lesson to learn. I think my children often took it to heart, and there were different stories across the years where I knew my kids had stood tall for somebody else that was being teased. And I was pleased that they were able to learn from my mistake. It was my mistake not to stand up tall for this young person in grade school. And I was so pleased that when my daughter came home and told me that some of the girls in her class had said, we don't want you to be friends with Susie anymore. And if you're not friends with Susie, you can be friends with us. And she looked at them and said, no, I will choose who my friends are. And I like Susie. And if that means you're not going to be friends with me, then so be it. And when she came home and told me that story, I was so proud of her and so pleased. And I knew that as she grew older, she would look back on those days, even though it was hard for her. It was difficult. But I knew she would look back without any regret in that regard. And why? Because she had learned from my mistake. She didn't have to make the same mistake I learned. It's not easy to do because we often have knee-jerk reactions to situations, and our feelings can get very, very involved in our reaction to any situation. But hopefully, you will take this old saying to heart, and the next time a situation arises, you can stop and think for a minute. Have you ever seen a particular situation happen to someone else? How did it turn out for them? Maybe I should do it differently because they didn't have a successful story. And this applies to just so many things in our life. A teenager who thinks it's cool to go speeding down a highway, maybe drink and drive. You know friends, you know people that didn't turn out well. You don't have to drink and drive to know that that's a very bad decision. You don't have to speed down the highway to know that speed is the cause of many accidents on a highway. I mean, this old saying applies to so many situations in our life. Take it to heart, and maybe your road and your journey in life will be just a little easier if you take time to consider how other people reacted to a situation and whether their reaction was successful or it was a mistake. So once again, as we said at the beginning, learn from the mistakes of others because life is too short to make them all yourself. I hope you come back to visit. I hope you press the like button. I hope you'll subscribe. Come back and visit.